Hi, here we are with our modernism essay. Choose one of the following topics and construct an argumentative essay based on research and your own close reading of the primary text. So we have a lot of different authors in this section, obviously, just like we did in the other sections. So choose one of these questions, and again, some of these are questions that could be used with more than one author. So the first question is, how does the poetry of either W.B. Yeats or T.S. Eliot demonstrate the characteristics of modernism as an intellectual and artistic movement? You may cite our textbook when establishing a definition of modernism. Okay, so you can use Greenblatt's text. You are required to engage at least 2 works from our syllabus by your chosen author. Now let me caution you on this. Do not choose one work by Yeats and one work by Eliot. Choose 2 by Yeats or 2 by Eliot. Because, well, some of you have already heard me use the expression narrow and deep. It's going to not be very good if you're doing 2 authors in such a short work. And again, I consider a 1,000-word essay a pretty short essay. It's not hard to get to 1,000 words if you're really doing the work. So 2 by Yeats or 2 by Eliot. Okay, in Eliot's case, those 2 would be the both ones that are in the syllabus, right? The Wasteland and the Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Yeats, excuse me, you have more options. Second question. Using one of the short stories from our syllabus, again, our syllabus, argue how James Joyce employs the concept of epiphany. What is the purpose and effect of his use? Be sure to define the term as a literary concept early in your essay. And again, you can use Greenblatt's text as a means of doing that. There are, of course, other literary uses. Do not go to the Merriam-Webster's dictionary or the Google dictionary. That's stupid. Right? You need a literary work. You need a literary definition, because it's not necessarily what you're going to find in a general purpose dictionary, okay? Now, the short stories from James Joyce are Araby and The Dead, right? So you choose one of those. Now, obviously, Araby is pretty short, so some of my students like to do it because it's short. But, if you're trying to get an A in the class and you want to do A work, sometimes you want to, amp up the difficulty level, right? And The Dead, and I wouldn't call The Dead a particularly difficult work. It's longer than Araby, obviously, just in terms of pages and words. Either one will be fine, though. It's very, very important, however, that you understand what epiphany actually means as a literary concept. Here's another question that's based on a key term. What does the stream of consciousness narration in Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf suggest about human consciousness or identity? How does this technique affect the role of time in the novel? So with Mrs. Dalloway, right, which is, of course, a novel, right, stream of consciousness narration is the defining quality of that novel. So why did she use it? What is this really about? Right? So I want you to dig deeply into this question to talk about notions of identity. Now, time, well, you'll see how it works when you read the novel, but time is essentially somewhat fluid in the novel, as key characters remember things from the past while they're all participating in the present of the novel. Okay. Now, the fourth question is an option question again, and you get to choose whichever author from the modernist section you would like to use. Choose one of the modernist authors from the syllabus. Okay, so that's Yeats, Eliot, Joyce, Virginia Woolf. argue how he or she uses contemporary affairs, history, religion, artistic or literary tradition, and or other manifestations of culture to create works that are pregnant with new meaning. In other words, what is this modernism about? What it really defines these authors, these writers that makes for modernism? I mean, how does this really work? Because modernism, well, in my opinion anyway, is an incredibly interesting time, right? And what they did with art shifted art fundamentally. In the same way we talked about Romanticism shifting art from what had come before Romanticism. Well, modernism is a reaction, obviously, to Victorianism, but also to Romanticism as well, quite frankly. With modernism, we lined up really in many ways about 180 degrees away from Romanticism. So what's going on with that? The paper is due to be submitted to Canvas by Monday, August the 1st at 11:59 p.m. Be sure to follow the out-of-class essay guidelines for matters of form and style. Use correct MLA documentation as described in the MLA for Literature class handout and or the handbook 9th edition. Now, I don't require you, to own the 9th edition, but we do need to adhere to it. We have, of course, our handouts, and there are many online sources available to you to get this right. Please do not use APA and do not use the out-of-date earlier editions of MLA. Now, 8th is not so bad, but 7th is different and 6th is really different. And I can tell just by looking at a works cited page which edition you're actually using. If you're not using the 9th edition, I can say, oh, that's a 7th edition there. I don't want to have to do that. I want everything to be 9th edition. Be sure to include a word count at the end of your essay, right? So you and I both know that you've met the minimum requirements, although to be honest, it's always pretty easy to see when somebody's short. Remember, you must meet minimum requirements, including word count, sources, and subject. No late essays will be accepted without a verifiable medical or legal excuse. I've been hearing excuses lately, but from some of you, it's been a little hard to get the verified part. So let's make sure if you have that problem that you get some verification, because otherwise I'm not accepting it. Now, the minimum requirements, as we've been doing previously, are pretty much the same. 1,000 to about 1,400 words. As I say, it's better to be over that, 1,400 than under. If you're writing something that's interesting, I don't mind. Okay. If you're under 1,000 words, to me, right off the bat, I know you haven't done the work. It's as simple as that. Don't say I had nothing more to say. That means you haven't thought through it enough. Citations from at least 4 different sources. One of the sources must be the primary text. In other words, Mrs. Dalloway or Araby or Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock or whatever it is you're using. Okay. So if you're using one of the questions, like the first question that requires you to have 2 works, okay, that still just counts as one primary text. Just keep that in mind. 2 sources at least must be scholarly works such as dissertations, peer-reviewed journal articles, or excerpts from university press books. The 4th source can be a source of your own choosing, but it must be a credible analytical source in its own right. The textbook only counts as a primary text, although you may certainly use its editorial materials in your essay. In other words, the Greenblatt stuff. You may have more than these 4 sources, right? Again, I don't want you to feel like you are limited, like you can't have more than 4. Of course you can have more than 4. Minimum is different than maximum, right? These are minimum requirements. Please, as I already said, use MLA format, presentation, and documentation. Any other format will lower your grade significantly. Okay, so there we go. For my mind, this is the modernisms are modernist writers are some of the most interesting of the whole semester. Certainly very challenging. I had a professor myself when I was in school who said English departments exist because of modernist writers. In other words, to explain them. So here we go. Our reason for existing.